What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Christmas. Last time, you might recall, we looked at Christmas from the times before Christianity was even a thing, up through the Protestant Reformation, and how that affected St. Nicholas Day in particular in Germany. This week, we're going to be looking at the British Isles, England in specific. As we mentioned last week, Christianity came to the British Isles earlier than much of continental Europe, and Christmas celebrations were a part of that. England was Christianized by the 5th century CE, and according to legend, in 597 CE, Augustine, not that Augustine, this Augustine, the first Archbishop of Canterbury, baptized 10,000 pagans on Christmas Day. That is a big Christmas. Britons of the Middle Ages and later also certainly believed that King Arthur, of whom you may have heard, celebrated Christmas, as it is indeed at a Christmas feast that he is interrupted by the Green Knight, who comes in to issue some decapitation-related challenges. The sumptuous feast described by the Green Knight poet, the anonymous poet of the Green Knight, is echoed in a pseudo-Arthurian work by 19th century English author John Hookham Frere, who described Arthur's Christmas as such. He says, "They served up salmon, venison, and wild boars, by hundreds and by dozens and by scores, hogsheads of honey, kilderkins of mustard, muttons and fatted beeves and bacon swine, herons and bitterns, peacocks, swan and bustard, teal, mallard, pigeons, widgeons, and in fine, plum puddings, pancakes, apple pies, and custard. And therewithal they drank good Gascon wine, with mead and ale and cider of our own, for porter punch and negus were not known." So, alright. In the High Middle Ages, monarchs and lords were holding these huge Christmas feasts that included, hundreds of oxen, pigs, sheep, weird birds like peacocks, swans, herons, and cranes, like we heard in the poem there, herons and bitterns, peacock, swan, and bustard, which is a bird, it turns out. Things like that. King Richard the Lionheart is supposed to have hosted a feast that included 400 pigs, 3,000 chickens, 15,000 herrings, 10,000 eels, 27 barrels of wine, and then also various birds like pheasants, partridges, etc. So while feasts like Arthur's and Richard's, are certainly not supposed to be taken as standard, right? The reason they're being written about is that they are sumptuous to an extreme, but nevertheless, it is certainly true that everybody was eating better than normal at Christmas time. Even poorer people would be having meat and white bread, things that they did not necessarily have the rest of the year. For example, an English tradition in the Middle Ages included killing a boar and then presenting its head at the Christmas feast, which is famously recorded in the 15th century Christmas carol known as the Boar's Head Carol. If you've seen Boar's Head brand deli meats, that's a reference to this tradition. The Boar's Head Carol is a mix of English and Latin. It goes a little something like this. "The boar's head in hand bring I, bedecked with bays and rosemary, and I pray you, my masters, be merry, quod estis in convivio," which means however many of you there are at the party. And then the chorus says, "Caput apri defero redens laudes domino," which means I'm bringing in the pig's head, rendering praises unto the Lord. "The boar's head, as I understand, is the rarest dish in all this land, which thus bedecked with a gay garland, let us servire cantico," which means let us serve with a song. "Our steward hath provided this in honor of the King of Bliss, which on this day to be served is in Reginenciatrio," which means in the hall of Queen's College at Oxford. So, Boar's Head Carol, that one goes back to late Middle Ages, early modern period. However, all of these salted eels and pigheadery was not to remain merry at Christmas time in merry old England. Just as the Protestant Reformation had significant repercussions for the celebration of Christmas, the whole Christmas season in continental Europe, such effects would also be felt in the British Isles as well. As you may know, however, England did not separate from the Catholic Church the same way that Europe did. The contention was one of authority, not of theology. Henry wanted to prove that he was the strongest one there is, and he could marry and unmarry whoever he wanted. As such, after Henry VIII separated from Rome and formed the Church of England, he kept celebrating Christmas in the sumptuous style to which he had become accustomed. The things we were just talking about, crazy feasts and such, where you eat weird birds. Like swans. You can only eat swans if you're the king. That's the thing. You can look that up. That's a law. Only the king or queen can eat a swan in England. It's a little more complicated than that, but you can look it up. It is a law. Anyway, Henry's daughter Elizabeth I. It might surprise you to look at this demure dress she's wearing, but she enjoyed lavish Yuletide celebrations as well, because she especially liked getting presents that included, modest couture, such as she is exhibiting in this photo. She was also apparently notorious for cheating at dice at Christmas time. She apparently had her own set of loaded dice that she would use to cheat at gambling. But it was during the reigns of her successor, who was her cousin James I, yes, the King James of the King James Bible, that guy, and then James's son Charles I, that English Puritans began gaining significant influence, and which they used to vociferously condemn the celebration of Christmas as foolish popery. Not potpourri, popery. They claimed that Christmas was not but a Catholic invention, and as such had no business in a proper Christian country like England. So Charles's response, when the Puritans demanded that his Christmas japeries cease, his response was to Christmas even harder. And if you know English history, and if you don't, you are at the wrong channel. You can find another video that will tell you all about the English Civil War. You can look it up. The Puritans did not take Charles's response well. In 1642, a civil war broke out between the Puritans and the Royalists who supported Charles I. The Puritans wanted to eliminate both the monarchy and the Anglican Church. It wasn't just about the Christmas thing, but also it wasn't not about the Christmas thing. It was a little bit about Christmas. And then in 1649, this douchebag, the Puritans, under leadership of Oliver Cromwell, captured King Charles and straight just beheaded him like he was the Green Knight or something at Christmas. It wasn't at Christmas. The Puritans declared victory. They claimed that England was now a commonwealth, but by 1653, Cromwell dissolved the Commonwealth Parliament. He named himself Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland, and Ireland, and he proved that he was a good protector by immediately doing a huge genocide of Catholics in Scotland and Ireland. What a cool guy. During Cromwell's reign as protector, the Puritan Parliament sought to murder Christmas. They did so by outlawing seasonal plays. They declared Christmas a day of penance rather than one of celebration. They proclaimed, quote, "No observance shall be had of the 5 and 20th of December, commonly called Christmas Day, nor in any solemnity used or exercised in churches upon that day in respect thereof." Businesses were forbidden from closing on that day. You could not take that day off. Charles I was not the only prisoner taken by Cromwell and his cronies at that time. The other notable figure persecuted by the Puritans was a bit older than the king. He had first appeared in the 1400s when an English rector named Richard Smart wrote a musical dialogue between a choir and a man who was known variously throughout the dialogue as Noel, Sir Christmas, and Lord Christmas. By 1616, when Ben Jonson, the second most famous playwright of the Elizabethan era after what's that guy's name? I can't remember what it is, but I'm I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. Ben Jonson wrote the play Christmas, His Mask. The figure in that was known as Old Christmas, who appears with his 8 children: Misrule, Carol, Mince Pie, Gamble, Post and Pear, New Year's Gift, Mumming, Wassail, Offering, and Baby Cake. Um, by this time, there was an abundance of seasonal plays featuring a personification of the Yuletide spirit. He's known variously as King Christmas, Captain Christmas, Prince Christmas, Sir Christmas, Lord Christmas, and yeah, you know it. It's Father Christmas. So, when Puritans' efforts to abolish Christmas increased, the people who supported both traditional celebrations and uh, by connection to that, the monarchy and also the Church of England, they used Father Christmas as a mascot, a figurehead for their cause, because he represented the old ways, right? He represented the traditions. And so a 1638 play called The Spring's Glory by Thomas Nabbs sees Father Christmas appear as an old gentleman in a furred gown and cap who defends traditional Christmas from Puritan condemnation. 1646, an anonymous satirical pamphlet called The Arraignment, Conviction, and Imprisoning of Christmas, in which a royalist lady is frantically searching for Father Christmas, portrays the title says it, a royalist woman. She's talking to a town crier and says, "Where has Christmas gone?" That same year, 1646, the poet John Taylor wrote The Complaint of Christmas, in which Father Christmas travels from one Puritan town to another and sees, quote, "no sign or token of any holy day." That same guy, Taylor, published another pro-Christmas pamphlet, this one right here, you can see on the screen, The Vindication of Christmas, or his 12 years observations upon the times, which has Old Christmas promoting a classic Merry Christmas, including booze, while wryly observing the hypocrisy of Puritans who say that churches have to be closed on Christmas and taverns have to be open. This pamphlet, as you can see here on the front page, includes a woodcut of Old Christmas here in the middle, of 2 men arguing over whether Christmas is welcome. The first guy is saying, "Keep out, you come not here." Christmas says, "Sir, I bring good cheer. Old Christmas welcome, do not fear." As far as anyone knows, this is the earliest depiction of any Christmas gift bringer. And you can see here he is. He's got his long beard, he's got a hat, he's got long robes, all that, like you would expect a Christmas boy to have. Altogether, the celebration of Christmas was forbidden under the Puritans for about 15 years, from roughly 1644 to about 1660. They made their intention fully clear with the 1647 declaration called the Ordinance for Abolishing of Festivals, which formally abolished Christmas in its entirety, along with other traditional church festivals like Easter and Pentecost. However, the Christmas ban did not last forever. Cromwell died in 1658. His son became the next Lord Protector, but those who still supported the monarchy, the royalists, they regained control of Parliament in 1659, and they went to get Charles I's son, Charles II, out of exile, put him back on the throne. They restored the monarchy, which you might have heard continues until this day. So in 1678, the restoration of the King of England and the King of Christmas was celebrated in this pamphlet that you can see an illustration from. It's called The Examination and Trial of Old Father Christmas, in which Father Christmas is accused of, a quote, "abusing the people of this commonwealth, drawing and enticing them to drunkenness, gluttony, and unlawful gaming, wantonness, uncleanness, lasciviousness, cursing, swearing, abuse of the creatures, some to one vice, some to another, all to idleness." As serious as those things sound, it becomes clear that the author of this pamphlet was saying them in jest, because Father Christmas is fully acquitted of this impressive list of charges when the jury says, "It is none of this old man's fault, neither ought he to suffer for it." So after the end of the Puritan Revolution, we see the restoration of seasonal Christmas plays, including mummers' plays, which It's another tradition that continues to this day. You can find some on YouTube if you want. Father Christmas becomes one of the many stock characters in these plays. He's not in all of them, but he's frequently used. Mummers plays tend to follow a plot template that surrounds the idea of death or resurrection. Usually the main character is someone like St. George, you can see over here, who's the patron saint of England. Usually he fights some kind of monster. I guess she's a dragon. Is this a squid? I don't know what's going on. Here's Father Christmas. And there's usually, there's a doctor. So St. George is killed at some point, and the doctor comes and revives and brings him back to life. That's the plot structure of most Mummers plays. And the characters come in and they do a little line, and that's really, each one walks, that's how the play goes, right? They walk to the front of the stage, and it's not a stage, you do it like outdoors or whatever, and then they say a couple lines and they step back in line. But anyway, Father Christmas, he typically only has one line where he says, "In comes I, Father Christmas, welcome or welcome not, I hope old Father Christmas will never be forgot." Well, some bad news about that vis-a-vis Christmas being forgot. The Puritans did some damage to Christmas. Christmas did not fully recover for quite some time after the Puritans, but besides the fact that Christmas itself had been forbidden following a civil war, the following 150 years or so see considerable societal and cultural changes in England. We've got the Industrial Revolution, which sees rural communities dwindling and then bustling industrial cities growing. The Christmas celebrations that we saw from Henry, Elizabeth, James, Charles, those were based on a rural society in which you couldn't work during the winter. And so the nobles hold these huge extravagant parties for everybody and their sizable land out in the country that they have. But by the 1800s, however, industrial labor means that you're lucky to get a single day off of work. So as a result, Christmas celebrations become much smaller, more personal affairs where people celebrate quietly at home, if at all. The common claim that you'll see a lot of people say is that Christmas was on its last legs by 1820, dead by 1840 in England. That's an exaggeration, but it is fair to say that its position as a cultural celebration had diminished significantly, substantially, since the Middle Ages. Two significant figures, however, arose to raise Christmas to new heights, such as we have today, both of whom I feel very confident that you have heard of. Charles Dickens, Queen Victoria. Together they fight crime. They were not, however, single-handed Christmas heroes. It was not the two of them. It's not like he was doing the mouth-to-mouth and she was doing the chest pumps or whatever, and they revived Christmas. Other people were still creating Christmas things. Sir Walter Scott, you might have heard of him. Ivanhoe. Other poems. He wrote a poem called Marmion in 1808. A large portion of that describes old Christmas customs, what he calls old Christmas. 1836, you got Thomas K. Hervey writing the Book of Christmas, which includes these iconic illustrations of Father Christmas by the artist Robert Seymour. This one of Father Christmas holding the bowl of wassail, riding the goat, amazing, classic. In 1842, the Illustrated London News starts publishing a series of covers featuring Father Christmas holding some kind of alcoholic beverage. Here you can see he's got the Yule log on his back. This is a bowl of wassail again, but there's a bunch of them, and each time he's holding something different. So there were still people creating Christmas things, putting out Christmas artifacts, culture, ephemera. It was still happening. Christmas wasn't dead. It just wasn't the big, huge public thing that it had been. But the big pieces of the puzzle were Dickens and Victoria. Dickens had tried to boost Christmas in 1836 with a story within his novel The Pickwick Papers that was called The Story of the Goblins Who Stole a Sexton, in which a gravedigger, or a sexton, named Gabriel Grubb is persuaded by supernatural forces, goblins, not to be so grumpy at Christmas. Maybe that plot sounds familiar to you, I don't know. But despite this, it wasn't until his work in 1843 that he kind of really sealed the Christmas deal. You might have heard of it. It was an immediate smash success, and it is arguably the most famous Christmas story of all time. This does not include a manger. Then in 1848, the Illustrated London News featured this iconic drawing, you can see on the screen here, of the royal family standing around a Christmas tree decorated with fancy hand-blown glass ornaments, standing here on a table. You can see Albert here, and I assume this is Victoria here. Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, was German, and he had brought all of his German Christmas traditions, like the Christmas tree and hand-blown glass ornaments, he brought them with him to England. So the 1-2 punch of A Christmas Carol, the realization that Victoria and her husband do Christmas this way, plus popular Christmas media, both at home, like the ones we were looking at, and then coming in from the United States. A little poem you might have heard of called A Visit from St. Nicholas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, right? That's happening. That was the 1820s. So those kind of things all coming in lead to a new kind of like festive Victorian Christmas, which includes Christmas trees in the parlor, giving gifts, dinners where you're eating turkey, Brussels sprouts, plum pudding, Christmas crackers, and then by the 1870s, you get your stockings filled by Father Christmas. There he is right there in the middle. Turkeys are, of course, native to the Americas. You might know that. But they'd been brought to Britain from America hundreds of years before the Victorian era. However, for much of that time, they were too expensive for normal people to enjoy. Chicken as well. The traditional Christmas dinner was roast beef, very British thing to eat. In the north, you would eat beef. In the south, it was goose. If you know, Christmas is coming, the goose is getting fat, right? That was the favorite in the South and in London. Some poor people ate rabbit instead, which presumably they hunted themselves. But the Christmas menu for Queen Victoria in 1840 and her family included beef and, of course, a royal roast swan. It's only the Queen can eat the swan. Merry Christmas, Queen. Eat this swan. But by the end of the century, however, the end of the 1800s, into the 19th century, most people were eating turkey. You can see this transition represented in this weird postcard where you can see this is a plum pudding riding on a turkey, jousting with a piece of beef riding on a pig. So this is the new Christmas traditions jousting with the old Christmas traditions. That's what's going on here in this postcard. Without that, even with that context, I understand that it's weird, but here it is. Christmas crackers, you heard me mention, they are not a crunchy snack. They are these. They were invented in 1846 by a candy maker in London named Tom Smith. He originally just wanted to make fancy paper to wrap his candy in, but he developed them by adding other things that made them sell better, and they became very popular and a big tradition. So inside you would have little, originally love notes. These days it's jokes, terrible jokes on little slips of paper. Paper hats, like little paper crowns. Small toys, whatever. And also the reason why they're called crackers is one person grabs one end, the other person grabs the other end, you pull it like a wishbone, and theoretically it goes bang when when it pops apart, when it cracks open, and the person who gets the big end gets the stuff inside, I guess, is the rule. But if you are British and watching this, Americans do not know what these are. We do not have these. They are not a thing. Sorry, I know they're incredibly popular, but just know that when an American watches a piece of British media set at Christmas and everyone's sitting around the table wearing paper crowns, Americans have no idea what's going on. Anyway, a guy named Henry Cole in 1843 hired an artist to design a card for Christmas. This is it. This is the card. This is, in fact, the first Christmas card. Right here, you're looking at it with your very own eye bones. This is the very first Christmas card. You can see it's a group of people sitting around a dinner table. You got the Christmas message, a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you. Apparently the specific phrasing Merry Christmas, also popularized by Charles Dickens. Originally, these cost a shilling, a little too expensive for ordinary Victorians, and so they're not immediately popular. However, the idea of a card for Christmas caught on in popularity, and many kids, including Queen Victoria's children, began making their own Christmas cards. However, this was the industrial age, and eventually color printing technology advanced very rapidly, which caused the price of production for color cards to drop significantly, and soon you have so they also introduced a postage rate of a half penny, and so the Christmas card industry skyrockets. It takes off big time. By the 1880s, sending Christmas cards is hugely popular. It's a huge industry. 11.5 million cards in 1880 alone. Big step towards the commercialization of Christmas. There are tons of Christmas cards, postcards as well. Many of them are extremely strange, including the example I gave of the plum pudding jousting a piece of beef. You can find many of them on my friend Craig's website, weirdchristmas.com. Please check that out to see lots of weird vintage Christmas and Halloween and other holiday cards and postcards, but specifically weird Victorian Christmas cards. That's a whole other thing. Just trust me, there's a million of them. Anyway, gift giving. As you might have heard, when I was talking about Father Christmas and his children, one of them was New Year's gifts. Gifts were originally given at New Year's, but as Christmas becomes more popular, the gift giving shifts there. And originally they would have been, and this is true in so many places, like we've already seen, originally the gifts would have been modest. They would have been pieces of fruit, nuts, cookies, little sweets, maybe some small handmade trinkets, little toys, or whatever. And these would have even been hung on the Christmas tree. You can see in this picture there's like candy canes and looks like maybe some little fruits and things hung on the tree. But as gift giving became more central to the whole thing, the gifts get bigger. They're bought at the store. They get put under the tree, like you can see here. Obviously, this rocking horse is too big to hang on the tree. Excuse me, I'm not editing that out. This is live. We're going live. Anyway, this is a mince pie. This is another important thing to English Christmas celebration. This is another thing Americans do not know about. If you say mince pie to Americans, they believe that it has meat in it. They think mince meat. You say the word mince, Americans assume the next word is meat. That's just how it is. However, early Victorian recipes show that mince pies did originally have meat in them. And that tradition goes back to the Tudor times, Henry and so on. It was only in the 19th century that the dish was recreated. There was a revolution. There was a mince pie revolution where they created the mixes without meat, which are it's fruit and spices. It's spiced fruit, and then this is sugary. Also, they're not very big. They're small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. They're little, they're spiced fruit. They're very good. There's no meat in them usually. Americans, sorry British people, Americans don't know this one. They don't know a lot of things. It's just how it is. All right. One of the questions I get asked about the most vis-a-vis Christmas traditions is why in the song it's the most wonderful time of the year. Why did they say there'll be scary ghost stories? Why did they say that? Why is that a thing in that song? Everyone is so confused by that. Did they misspeak? Did they mean to say there'll be merry boast plories? I should have written that joke beforehand instead of painting myself into a corner. But here we are. Why do they say scary ghost stories? Well, the fact is, for a long time, ghost stories were an essential part of any Christmas celebration. It's not a coincidence that the most famous Christmas story of all time that doesn't have a manger in it is a ghost story. And that's not the only one. That wasn't an outlier. That was the thing. In fact, it's not even the only Christmas ghost story by Dickens. And not even including the Goblin one. The Goblin one and the other one are not even the only ones. He did like 4 more. Anyway, author and humorist Jerome K Jerome, who was known to write a few ghost stories himself, he said, whenever 5 or 6 English-speaking people meet round a fire on Christmas Eve, they start telling each other ghost stories. Nothing satisfies us on Christmas Eve but to hear each other tell authentic anecdotes about specters. It is a genial, festive season, and we love to muse upon graves and dead bodies and murders and blood. The frame story of Henry James's monumental ghost novella, The Turn of the Screw, which was adapted in 2020 as Netflix's The Haunting of Bly Manor. The frame story of that novella is a bunch of dudes sitting around a fire at Christmas telling each other ghost stories until one of the guys says he's got one that will top them all that's about a governess and 2 kids. They did move the frame from Christmas to a wedding in the TV show. Upsetting, but okay. However, the undisputed master of the ghost story for Christmas was M.R. James, who was a medievalist and scholar who wrote much about Bible and biblical apocrypha. But he also wrote ghost stories for his friends at Christmas. He would write them to read to them in front of a fire at Christmas Eve. For the most part, though, these stories weren't set during the holiday season, but they exemplify the trend. They served as a basis for most of the episodes of the BBC's A Ghost Story for Christmas TV specials, which they made some even recently, but those were really popular in the 70s. You can find some of them on YouTube that are especially ones based on M.R. James. Look up Whistle and I'll Come to You. That's what this illustration is from. Anyway, here's another weird thing that Victorian people did at Christmas time. It's a game called Snapdragon. So how you play Snapdragon, you can see these people here. You get a big, wide, shallow bowl, and then into the bowl you pour a bunch of raisins, like 25 raisins. I don't know. I guess it probably depends on the people, how big the bowl it is. But like a bunch of raisins. And then if you don't have raisins, you can do almonds, or grapes, plums, any other kind of like small, bite-sized thing. Then you pour in a bottle of brandy so that the raisins or almonds or whatever float on the surface. And then you put the bowl on a steady table, such as you can see in this photo, and you set it on fire. You set the brandy on fire. And then, to play the actual game, once you've got it set up, your family and your friends stand around the table, and one by one, you reach into the bowl, you grab a raisin, a flaming raisin, and then you try to pop it into your mouth and extinguish the flame. And that is the game. You reach into a fire, You take a piece of fruit that's on fire, and you put it into your mouth. Someone writing about the game at the time said that it provided a considerable amount of laughter and merriment at the expense of the unsuccessful competitors. I imagine that's probably true. I feel like it's like those videos of people failing to take flaming shots, except it's not even alcohol. It's a raisin. I mean, it is alcohol. It's a raisin, though. You're risking your health for a raisin. The game was so popular, there was a poem about it. Here's a quote. With his blue and lapping tongue, many of you will be stung. Snip, snap, dragon. For he snaps at all that comes, snatching at his feast of plums. Snip, snap, dragon. So, yeah. For Victorians, it's Christmas time. How do you know? Oh, because my hand is covered in burn scars, and I can't taste anything. The roof of my mouth is smooth. Anyway, hey, Father Christmas, let's talk about that guy. So originally, Father Christmas, as seen here, pulled in a cart by two little boys. He was not originally a gift bringer, if you remember from the plays that I was talking about. He was an incarnation of the festive celebration of traditional Christmas. He liked to drink, he liked to eat, he liked to party. And you can see that reflected in a lot of vintage and traditional Father Christmas postcards. However, under the influence of the increasing popularity of you-know-who, the American Santa Claus, Father Christmas did begin filling shoes and stockings around about 1870, and the practice became widespread very quickly. And, like I said, initially, presents would have been very simple, fruits and nuts and so on, little handmade toys. At the beginning of the Victorian era, handmade toys would have been very expensive, and so again, these kind of toys would have been restricted to rich families, but industrialization going on at the same time leads to mass production, and as a result, you can have mass-produced games, dolls, books, little clockwork toys, at a more affordable price. And as a result, the middle class is able to start indulging in these kind of toys as well. So you can see Father Christmas carrying, who knows, what is this? This is probably a gingerbread. He's got a drum, some dolls. I don't know what he has. Is this a kaleidoscope? I don't know. Is it a can of soda? Anyway, a poor child would still be getting like an apple, an orange, some walnuts or something. So all right, we've talked St. Nicholas and how Martin Luther tried to kill him. We talked Father Christmas, how Oliver Cromwell tried to kill him. Next week, we're going to add a dash of Washington Irving, little Clement Moore, little Thomas Nast. A few surprises. We're going to add them up to the mix, and we're going to see what we get. That's right, it's American Christmas. You know, this guy. You recognize him, right? Anyway, until then, have a good Christmas.